It's Friday. Before you go off to the weekend to have that rest, let's do 55 minutes of business right here on Business Incorporated. Here's what we have for you on this episode of the program. After South Africa Reserve Bank held its rate, a lot of reactions have been following that. And Nigeria gets $500 million World Bank loan for electricity distribution. Will that make a difference? It's also electricity in Kenya. Consumers seem to be getting the upper hand when it comes to disputed bills. Good afternoon. Welcome to the program. I'm Ini John McCall. We start from the global space as usual. Oil prices held steady on Friday as investors await U.S. inflation data for clues on the demand outlook before turning attention to Sunday, a big day for OPEC+. They'll be meeting virtually to determine the state of supply into next year. Looking at the prices, Brent futures for July delivery went down 44 cents. That's about 0.5% to $81.42 a barrel. But WTI is on the opposite side. We see that it gained 0.3% at $77.97 a barrel. The spread between the two contracts hit an 11-month low, entering contango for the first time this year. Of course, those drivers, U.S. inflation is one big thing coming up today from the United States that's going to determine the movement of prices at the close of trade. And then we move to metals now and see what's happening right there. Gold prices were set for a fourth straight monthly gain, even as the market struggled for momentum on Friday ahead of that U.S. data, which we talked about. Everything moves around the U.S. data, U.S. inflation, U.S. interest rate and all. Spot gold was unchanged, $2,343.63 per ounce. Bullion prices are up 0.4% so far this week and 2.5% so far in the month. U.S. gold futures also flat, waiting for those numbers, $2,341.80. The monthly gains are due to the central bank's buying element and the residual geopolitical risk, which is still ongoing. The market obviously is waiting for that inflation number from the United States. And now in Nigeria and the World Bank in this case, the Nigeria Bureau of Public Enterprises has announced a $500 million World Bank loan. That's to bolster Nigeria's electricity distribution. According to the BPE, the loan was approved on February the 4th, 2021 by the World Bank Board of Directors to support the Nigerian distribution sector recovery program, which is aimed at improving the financial and technical performance of the discos. The Bureau states that key areas of improvement include bulk procurement of customer and retail meters, meter data management systems, implementation of data aggregation platform, and strengthening governance and transparency within the discos. I'm sure a lot of Nigerians get excited about that, but we'll see where it goes and how it transfers into the fiscal and the distribution of electricity. Still in Nigeria, the Presidential Committee on Fiscal Policy and Tax Reforms has asked the federal government to, among other things, adopt a fixed exchange rate of 800 naira for a dollar for customs import, and this is supposed to last for a year. The chairman of the committee, Mr. Taiwo Yedele, who made this known to journalists in Lagos during an interactive session giving updates on the activities of the tax panel, also shared some findings and proposals that could harmonize the tax system and make collection more effective.
To get the data points right. So if you say to anyone, and that anyone can be a governor, can be a minister, to say we have 60-something official taxes, let's not even go into the unofficial one. From these 60, we're collecting 95% from less than 6. So it already shows that we have a lot of nuisance taxes that are imposing burden on our people, but still not providing revenue to the government. I don't see why anybody would say no to something like that. So that's the first point. The second point is to find the carrot in it. So this is not just a stick approach. We're saying, their government, local government, state government, government agency, we have an idea of one tax that is easy to collect, not placing burden on the people, that can give you money more than all these other taxes. Don't tax produce, haulage for transporting stuff. Those things are not necessary. So we think that is another point. And the third point is actually going from the constitutional aspect. We're putting it in the constitution. Hopefully we succeed to say that the limit of taxes anyone, business or individual, can pay should not exceed a single digit. So if you get that done, all that I just need to do is, once I go through the list, like the telecom guy said they have 43, that's all they need to do. Maybe the second thing is to find the dates those laws were introduced. The first 9 are constitutional, any other one is unconstitutional.
Obviously, a lot of work ahead of that committee, getting those things out of the ideas and papers into reality. And we'll stay on that story. Now, the African Growth and Opportunity Act, that's AGOA, and the African Continental Free Trade Area, after Act 2 of many opportunities available to businesses to explore. However, it seems the lack of knowledge on how to access these platforms have remained a militating factor to boosting trade. This is part of what the Science of Trade Conference seeks to fix as it gathers stakeholders from relative areas of business.
The amazing entrepreneurs who, in spite of...
Top of the agenda for the meeting is cultivating the financial habit for profitability. This implies that while passion is important, the drive for profitability should be prioritized as well.
We are all about the branding, we are all about the passion, we are all about all of those things. Leaving the most fundamental thing, which is the money, which is the profitability. If you are not making money in your business, then you are not doing business. You could just go and register a not-for-profit. So if we are doing business, let's do business and let's make money. Now, the reason I laid that foundation is because many of us just do our business out of passion and we forget that important factor.
Business owners also get tips on accessing funding.
If you don't keep records of your sales and it reflects in what is in your bank statement, you will have a problem accessing funds from the bank. So it is important that there's a lot of focus on keeping appropriate records in the bank and, depending on whatever you're using, whether inventory, books or computer, you need to keep proper records so that when you are going to the bank, you say, look at my records.
I'm calling from CBN. I said, this is why you people, they've come again. I got the phone.
The conversation is not limited to tips for trade. The organizers are aiming to broaden the horizon of traders to connect with local and international platforms.
The focus is on the science behind trade. And what we're doing is to partner with the trade ecosystem, different partners within the trade ecosystem, to see how we can decongest the process of trade. Because we found that through our trainings, we give a lot of capacity building, access to finance, access to mentorship, but the missing part is always the access to markets.
AGOA and AFCFTA are on the list of platforms for the United States.
I deeply believe that trade often leads to investment. As people export their goods into the Nigerian market, they're often looking to then modify their exports and trade and develop them and end up investing so often, and vice versa into the United States. So we were talking about some of the trade concessions that are in place for Nigerian exporters. Under the African Growth and Opportunity Act, we call it AGOA, Nigerians are able to export over 6,800 different types of categories of goods into the United States duty-free. That means they come into the U.S. market and they already have a competitive advantage against exporters from a variety of other countries around the world. So those Nigerian goods can come into our market. And so what we want to see is Nigerians exporting across a variety of goods in a variety of different areas, because we believe that exports lead to economic growth, they lead to a better fiscal situation for Nigeria, and they lead to better relations between our countries.
Empowered to trade wide, participants now see opportunities ahead in trading in the domestic and international markets.
Now let's talk food. And the International Rescue Committee estimates that about 16% of Nigerians will be not food insecure, but severely food insecure by June. June starts tomorrow. And of course, we're still in the mood of celebrating or remembering that it's 1 year into the administration of President Bola Tinubu. Of course, he is declared a state of emergency on food insecurity. But let's talk to someone who has first-hand in the sector, find out if anything has changed. Are we able to avert that status of severe food insecurity for 16% of Nigerians by June 2024? We speak to the Managing Director of Banjoko Motunde Farms, Mr. Tunde Banjoko. Mr. Banjoko, thank you so much and good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Amy. Thank you for having me.
Great. So in the last 1 year, you've been a farmer before this last 1 year. Could you compare your experience, this last 1 year and previously, share with us the ups and downs, the good and the ugly?
Okay. Thank you, Amy, once again. Like you rightly said, I've been a farmer before 2023, and I'm still a farmer. So if I'm to be very objective, I would say nothing really has changed from where I sit and from what I see. Nothing has changed. To me, frankly, it's still like business as usual. Going by the data you said just now, as at this time last year, we were told 25 million Nigerians will be going through food issues between the lean season. And this year now, we are talking of 32 million Nigerians going through that. So that's a jump in that number. So it's as if we have continued the existing trend that the government met while they came into the office. Another thing we could also look at, as at this time last year, our food inflation was 23%, 23.6%. This year, we are talking of, at this time, exactly 1 year after, we are talking of 40.5% thereabout. So meaning our inflation figure too for food has gone up. So to me, it's like the trend is continuing from where the government met it last year. So I can't really say nothing has changed. And if you look at even using, if there's no yardstick, if there's no goalpost, there's nothing for us to measure. I will use what the government gave as the yardstick when they came into the office last year. I think sometimes in July 2023, the government came and declared about 11-point agenda declaring a state of emergency on food. I thought when I hear state of emergency, I'm talking of something where everybody will be focusing on how to change that situation immediately. But what I've seen in the last 1 year has not really matched up to that expectation. So I would say in the last 1 year, I only see a continuation of the trend. I see a bit of nonchalant attitude towards securing the nation in terms of food. Maybe I should stop there. Thank you.
Yeah, but I mean, if we go by the words, and you did, of course, mention that issue of the state of emergency declaration. It sounds like the president actually wants something to change. We've heard a lot of the grains reserve being shared and things like that. Where do you think perhaps we are missing the point? Why we are not getting the results we would love to see?
Okay, I would say we are missing them in two major areas. One is the execution. On two different occasions now, grain has been ordered to be released from the grain reserve to farmers and households that needs this food. Can we really ascertain how many farmers got this thing, or it was distributed as a political palliative to political allies in some community, not to solve the hunger issues? I was talking to a farmer in Osun State yesterday, and he was telling me some of the grains that was meant to be shared were sold to farmers. at a subsidized rate, though, but because people who got it just got it based on maybe government influence, they are selling it at subsidized rates. So it was not given, I'm using just an example. We've seen also on social media and in some states that had to interact with the farmers that what they got is far. If you are given maybe 1, 2, 3 kg to a farmer to plant or to substitute what they use in feeding their beds, that's making no difference. And that is why we have not seen any major difference in foods or prices in Nigeria in the last 1 year. Rather than the price of food coming down, it's been going up. So I think in the area of execution, we have politicized it too much. Probably the private sector should be involved in the distribution, because I always talk about it's not enough to have good ideas. The execution of these ideas makes all the difference. We should get more private sector involvement where these things are well monitored, that as the grains are being released, they are getting to the farmers and to the household that need them, not probably getting into some hands that will probably just go and resell. Because that's not the intention of the government. So we should be talking about how are these policies being executed. I think that's where we are missing it. And then I will also say, well, in times like this, we should probably be more concerned about the situation rather than compensating people with positions. Food is too sensitive a matter for us to be compensating people with positions, and then we are not allocating enough funds to the sector to buttress the urgency of the situation we have found ourselves. I think to be careful with words, it's really a messy situation that we have found ourselves in the last 1 year, going by what we see. I watched you earlier on today, and I saw the vivid prices in the market because some government agency thought probably the farmers or the market, remember, the one trying to play pranks on Nigeria. But the issues are still about the same, and I've not seen too much, action, political will, changing those narratives. So like you rightly asked, I think we should watch the way we execute this project and the people we are appointing to execute them. That's where I think I'm missing them.
Yeah, well, you know what you just said reminds me of a conversation I had with the CEO of Business Day a couple of days ago, and he actually does not have any good marks or words for the Minister of Agriculture. Sounds like you are following the same path. But now you're talking about, introducing the private sector into the distribution. And we know that, private sector, public sector, we're dealing with Nigerians here, who could have some not so good intentions and divert some of these things and even sell them as you have suggested.
One thing is, it's easier to hold a private sector accountable if it's been publicized that this firm has been engaged to go about this distribution. It's easier, the government can take them to court. If there is a petition against such a company, they can be blacklisted if petition is written against them. So there are some of the issues. So it's easier, but it's not easy to probably write a petition against a government agency or a government appointee. But it's easier when the government is leveraging people whose expertise is in the area of logistics and distribution. I think on this program we've talked about, the value chain, the distribution on some occasions. So it's not about even production or making it available, but we're talking about how is it getting to the people that need them. This is where the issue is. We have something very small to give. The very small is not getting to those who need it. And that's why we are still where we are. Why the numbers, rather than coming down, are still going up. And, like I was reviewing some documents earlier on today, and if care is not taken, if no drastic step is taken within the next few weeks, the numbers will be going up. And then I fear for, I still struggle as of this afternoon, how people earning minimum wage are surviving in Nigeria and why the crime rate is going up. So the government needs to pay serious attention and approach this situation really as an emergency. So I think the private sector is easy to deal with. You can hold them responsible, you can take them to court, you can charge them. So they are easy to deal with. Yeah,
Mr. Matunde, some people have said 1 year is too soon to judge this government. Perhaps, as you said, seems like things are not changing when it comes to food security and agriculture. Perhaps they are working on the ground. Do you expect that by this time next year we would have good tales?
No, this is what I would say. If you permit me, there's an adage in the Yoruba land that says, you know how Sunday will be from Friday, you understand. And it also says, you know how a child will be, if a child will be smart, even from his childhood. There's something about body language. It is the body language you see today that gives you an idea of how the next 1 year will be. I was reading the Minister of Agriculture's report for the last 9 months, 8 months, I think 9 months that they've been in the office. And I looked at the report and most of the report seems to be ambiguous. Meetings with this, meetings with that. And I asked on where I saw the report that, can anybody testify if they benefited from any of this program or directly benefited from all these numbers? And I'm yet to see anyone coming out to say, truly, these numbers can be verified. I also realized some of the so-called interventions are concentrated in some particular region of the country, which is also not good. So I think the body language, and you also, I tell people, let's leave the federal government alone. Let's look at what the states are doing in agriculture. If I'm to look at the 36 state governors we have in Nigeria, probably I'll pick just 1 or 2 that I probably think things will change in terms. I could only pick 2 or 3 at most that I could probably say their states might make some difference in the next 1 or 2 years, because we have to see the body language, we have to see the steps you are taking, we have to see the interventions, we have to see the collaborations. And, I will also look at, last year the president gave about 11 points. So to know if anything will change, out of the 11 points, we should have seen you prioritizing maybe 2, 3, 4 in the first 1 year. That gives us the bedrock of whether things will change. If I'm to pick any one of those 11 points, maybe I would have said number 1 should have been the commodity board, for example. Has the commodity board been set to start helping in strategizing the price of food and our strategic reserve, and making the price of food to be flat all through the year. So is there any conversation going on in that direction? Of course, on this program, we've talked severally about the Bank of Agri. Are they recapitalizing that bank? That should not take 4 years. So we should see the government of the nation should have prioritized some of these key issues in the first 1 year. That would have formed the bedrock for us to have confidence. What we need now is confidence to be able to produce and participate in the industry. A friend of mine was chatting, I think yesterday, and he was saying, who advertises oil and gas as a as an empowerment program? Nobody, because people see the industry as being lucrative, attractive. They are putting in their funds. But are people, investors, are they seeing agri as a lucrative and attractive industry to put their funds, whereby we can do what we need to do, and the sector will be attractive to attract the kind of funds that it should attract? That's when we start making any major difference and seeing headway in the nation. So I think language and all that is not there yet.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much, Mr. Omotunde. We hope the story will be different by this time next year. Managing Director, Omotunde Farms Limited, thank you for your views.
Thank you.
Back to watching Business Incorporated right here on Channels Television. We head to the markets now. The NGX has been looking good this week. I know Will is happy about that. But what I don't know is how much she has made.
Oh, no, we are just reporters.
Short of words.
We're just reporters.
You don't want your viewers
we
to know how much
report the market, and we help investors and traders to make the right decisions when they
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Reporter.
Thank you so much, Ini. So just the NGX has been on a roll this week. I can say that.
Surprisingly for me, because we've seen so much red, I was just holding my breath like, okay, let's just keep this up, especially because the fixed income market is still getting a whole lot of attention. We see attention has moved to OMO now, and yields are still going up, so I was like, okay, let's just accept this for now.
Well, investors are kind of like, they've mentioned it, rebalancing their portfolios. Some are still looking at the potentials in the equities market. You see Seplat yesterday signing that, settlement agreement, and that has boosted confidence in that stock. You saw a rally nearly, as in the oil and gas index rally nearly 6% yesterday, and it went up 10% in yesterday's trading session. So investors. And
we saw that Dangote had the AGM also.
Yes.
But I think that didn't translate into action from investors.
Oh, well, maybe investors have not, they're still digesting that, what came out of, the points that came out of that AGM, and they probably, we'll see some form of rally or some action from investors regarding Dangote. But you heard about Dangote refinery going to list by the end of the year, on the NGX.
I know a lot of people cannot wait. I mean, that is obviously a viable investment.
Of course.
For anyone who is interested and has the heart and the patience. Remember what happened to Geregu also when it came. And then there was also, there was Transcorp Power.
Transcorp Power.
Also,
just like, it just came out of nowhere, and everybody was like, oh, I missed it. Did I miss that train?
Yeah. My excitement actually is, I wonder what will happen to the market cap. I can't wait to get off the 55 trillion naira.
Of course. We will definitely see that shake up, that heavyweight Dangote refinery come into that market and really.
And we're waiting for NNPC.
It will deepen the market.
We're still waiting for NNPC.
Yes. And I think
I didn't say anything.
That ship sailed long ago, but we'll wait and see when they would eventually list as a publicly traded company. Well, we'll just continue with the markets. We'll start off with the equity, with the major equities in Africa, where sentiments were positive at intraday. We see Nigeria's NGX 0.06% up, South Africa also in the green, 0.03% up. And let's look at the EGX 30 in Egypt, however, closed on Thursday, but in red territory. We see it 0.62% down, and Kenya also closing Thursday's session in the red, down more than 1%. Let's just see what's happening at the FMDQ market, right? That's the fixed income market. We did in conversations with Ini. We're talking about the rally in yields in the fixed income space, and we're going to be joining us to talk about that is Caleb Alimi, is the chief dealer, Providence Bank, joining us this afternoon. Good afternoon, Caleb.
Good afternoon, Bill. Thank you for having me.
Caleb, we were just talking about the yields in the fixed income space, but that will be tied to liquidity. But the CBN apparently is keeping a closer watch on market liquidity as we speak. We saw 2 OMO auctions this week, worth about 1.5 trillion and 5 billion naira each. Break this down for us, Caleb. Why did we have this massive mop-up by the CBN?
First of all, the CBN's mandate is price stability. And a key, anchor of that is the exchange rate. So the first OMO auction was largely to drive FX into the market, and we had a lot of FPI interest. You recall that it was right after the recently concluded MPC meeting for the month. And so they had to sort of, invite FPIs to come into the market. And so we saw that OMO auction close at a record rate of 22.49%. with a participation of around 1 trillion or thereabout. So that particular first auction was to invite FPIs into the market, given there is FPIs and banks that can participate in the OMO auction. The second one was to mop up liquidity. We had a market was positively long, was positively liquid. Interbank market was positively liquid. And so the second OMO auction was to take out that liquidity where they sold exactly 500 billion of that. And the rates came slightly down to about 22.34%. So that's why we saw those 2 auctions over the last, in the course of this week. One was largely to target FPIs to bring in inflow of dollars, which we saw a lot of that. And we did see the CBN intervening into the interbank market right after that OMO auction, given that they had a good stock of FPI participation and FPI dollars that are coming to the market.
So looking at the market liquidity, we're seeing what is the current state as we speak?
Our market is currently positive. We're about 150 billion long. We're about 150 billion positive, and we expect that to help us through the rest of the weekend. Through the rest of the week, the month will close positive, and as we go into next month, we could see some CRR balancing activities from the CBN, where those that are short on their numbers will have a debit, and those that are excess on their numbers will have a credit. We'll see that balance out over as we go into next month. But what we've seen from this central bank is what we call a contractionary monetary policy. So we expect that even this 150 billion that we see this week, sometime next week will fizzle out, because they've consistently made sure the market is quite tight.
Okay, so how has that impacted yield, especially in the secondary markets? How has that impacted the yield there?
Yeah, so for treasury bills, we are seeing yields, slightly track upwards. As once market is a little tight, we'll see yields track upwards. But interestingly, yields are relatively stable, given that the home auction closed at 22.34%, it's trading much lower in the secondary market. But we're seeing more people trying to maybe sell off to create a bit more liquidity. What we'll find that sometimes the liquidity is concentrated in a few hands, so those that don't have liquidity will then come to the market to sell off their treasury bills. So market rates have been lower from the OMO auction. However, it's been relatively stable around, say, 21.7, 21.5%.
Okay, can you tell us what instruments investors are trading currently and what end of the yield curve?
Largely the 1 year yield curve, and largely the OMO papers are what we see banks just rotating amongst themselves. We're seeing a bit of sell-off on the what we call, it's not really short, but it's mid-dated papers, the February and March maturities. We're seeing a lot of banks coming to offload those papers to create more liquidity and sort of to also rotate into higher yielding OMO instruments.
Thank you so much, Caleb Alimi, Chief Dealer, Providence Bank, for your insights. It's always good to have you.
Thank you, Will.
So we'll move to the Middle East, where most major stock markets in the Gulf were closed Thursday, except in the UAE, because at intraday we saw the Abu Dhabi index up 0.49%, still riding on Thursday's green close. We see Dubai is also up 0.51%. Now, still within the region, Saudi and Qatari indexes are closed Thursday, but they closed mixed 1.65% and 0.43%. Now, Saudi Arabia's government on Thursday filed papers to sell a new stake in the state-oil giant Aramco that could raise as much as $13.1 billion, and that's a landmark deal to help fund the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's plan to diversify the economy. Now let's see how the stocks in the U.S. fared in early trade today. They ticked really low, I can tell you that for free. Investors reviewed the flurry of corporate earnings ahead of the key inflation data that is expected today. Now we see the Dow Jones Industrial Average, that's the futures side to that, was down 0.05%. S&P 500 futures down 0.3%, and the Nasdaq futures was also down 0.47%. Now, let's look at what investors did trade in yesterday's trading session, how that performed, but that's going to be with Maria Bird in the U.S.
The U.S. stock market had a challenging day on Thursday, as the Dow Jones was down at 0.86%. The S&P 500 down at 0.6%, and the heavy tech Nasdaq down at 1.08%. Many of the heavy tech companies are showing to have a bit of a challenge over the past few weeks. Many investors are a bit concerned as they're watching to see what are happening to big companies like Salesforce, who had one of its worst days in the company's history. This is making investors concerned to see what will happen in the next days and weeks ahead.
Thank you, Maria. Now let's see how stocks in the Asian region, the Asian markets, how they closed today. We saw that they rose yesterday. It was red for that region, but investors, looking through the data that are coming out from major economies across the region, we saw that uptick for the Japan's Nikkei that was up 1.14% to close. And we're also looking at the Kospi, we're seeing it up slightly 0.04%. And when we look at in China, we see the Hang Seng Index down 0.83%. And now let's look at Shanghai market. We see it's 0.16%, also reversing gains that they had yesterday. And we're seeing the Australian markets there up nearly 1%. We see that sentiments reversing, from that inflation data that came in and, dampened the sentiments in that region for investors. Now investors are bullish on that market now, back 0.96% to close the trading session for today. But we're just hoping that markets continue with bullish sentiments next week, especially with this week that's been heavy with data coming in from everywhere. Inflation, GDP numbers from the US yesterday, and investors are digesting this flurry of data, and also a flurry of earnings that also came out from the markets, especially in the US and Asia as well. So we're just looking at all that, and we're hoping that Nigeria's market stays green to close today, and next week continues.
We hope so. We hope so. But let's not forget that investors are in there to make money.
Of course.
So they'll take profit at some point.
Of course.
Thank you so much, Will. Right, let's move to Europe now. And an allegation, I don't know if to call it that, the EU is indirectly funding human rights abuses in Africa to avoid irregular migration into Europe. I don't know. But the new report by Lighthouse Reports, in collaboration with big newsrooms around the world, like the Washington Post, carried a year-long investigation which shows that there are, in fact, clear instances in which refugees or migrant workers on their way to Europe from Africa, as well as those who had legal status in the EU, were apprehended and then dumped in the desert. Let's get Vada now joins us to tell us more about this. Hi, Vada Imran, good afternoon. So what do we know about this?
Thanks for having me. So this report is called Desert Dumps and is a joint investigation with over a dozen reporters and 6 newsrooms from across the world. What this report has found is that Europe supports and also finances operations in northern African countries to dump thousands of people in the desert or remote areas to prevent them from coming to Europe. These findings paint a rather horrid picture where migrant workers or refugees in Morocco, Mauritania, and Tunisia on their way to the EU are apprehended and then loaded onto buses and cars, driven to the middle of the desert or remote areas and left there. They're left to fend for themselves without any assistance or food, clearly opening the road for torture, violence, or even death. All of their findings are based on the testimonies of 50 survivors of such an experience, all of whom were from sub-Saharan and Western African countries originally.
This is a strong allegation, Vada. What's EU saying?
So the EU, without a doubt, says that the funds are not being used for this purpose. But the report says that some EU sources did confide in them and say that it was impossible to fully account for how the European funding is being used on the ground. The EU spent hundreds of millions under the guise of migration management in recent years, the report says. But I think that it cannot be that the EU has no idea that these desert dumps have been taking place and how this violates even the most basic human rights. There are a lot of indications that some officials in the EU were aware of this not too long ago, and that vehicles, money, equipment paid for directly by the EU were being used. So this is one thing that kind of really ties the EU to the local police, for example, in Tunisia. The cars that they used matched in make and model with those donated by Italy and Germany. And what's important to note is that migration is a big topic in the upcoming EU elections.
Honestly, this is indeed a big story, rather, and I do know and hope that world leaders will react and look this way also. But let's move to the markets and see investor sentiments at this time.
Well, investors here are holding their breath for the Eurozone inflation data expected to come in today. This report is likely to sway markets as investors weigh over what the expectations are about global rates. And then kind of based on this inflation data, investors will gauge how the European Central Bank will react in terms of rate cuts. So there's a lot of anticipation packed in for today. Let's not forget that US inflation data is also expected this afternoon. A surprising thing is how markets did not budge on Donald Trump's guilty verdict as he became the first US president to be officially convicted.
Yeah, well, former President Donald Trump always making the news. Thank you so much, Father. Now, let's head to Africa, see what's happening. By now, you'd have heard that South African Reserve Bank's Monetary Policy Committee, that's the MPC, decided to keep the repo report unchanged at 8.25%. Reserve Bank Governor Lasetcha delivered the May MPC statement in Pretoria, stating that the decision was unanimous and that oil prices will also remain stable. This marks the 6th instance in the past year that the committee has opted to leave interest rates expected. Borrowing costs will therefore remain higher for consumers and businesses for longer. The MPC now believes that core inflation will reach the desired target of 4.5% sooner, by the second quarter of 2025 rather than the fourth quarter of 2025, as it now sees the risks of inflation as balanced instead of on the upside. Then we come to Nigeria. That visit by the FCCPC to some markets in Lagos, following what our guest said earlier, in trying to find out the source or the reason for the seemingly continuous hike in food prices. And the FCCPC did find some things. Arewa Perishable Foodstuff Market in Mile 12, Lagos, is the first port of call for the Federal Competition and Consumer Protection Commission in its drive to protect the right of consumers amidst what some have called unnecessary price hike. The agency meets with the officials, which include the 27 sectorial chairmen representing the different crops and products available in the market. The fact-finding mission begins with understanding how the market runs and how the crops are sourced.
The price of food going up every day. So the government is worried, and we are here to talk to you people in order to find out what is going on and why is this food prices going up.
In those days, I'm talking about 20-something years back, people who are bringing the goods do follow the trucks down to the market. That if you have 10 baskets, you follow your 10 baskets. If you have 20, you follow. But we have advanced now. They don't come themselves. So they send from the north. Like if we're sending onions of truck of onions about 300 bags. So maybe you have 10, I have 5, somebody have like that. So you just have to write a letter and send the driver to bring it because they are trusted. You send the driver to bring it for you, the driver will bring it down, they will identify the owners of it and who are the vendors that will sell for them in the market.
After the meeting, both officials walk around the market to get first-hand experience. Abulaigba Market, still in Lagos, is the next stop where the same routine is repeated, and it seems the FCCPC may have discovered some reasons for the price hike.
A message more is been to the government, maybe to at least try and beef up securities in these areas where these foodstuffs are coming from, because we can see in 2 markets that we've gone to, that is a major complaint.
After this, the people expect that the findings will be shared with relevant authorities and actions that could increase supply to reduce prices will be implemented. We move to Kenya now, where the Energy and Petroleum Regulatory Authority has proposed new regulations that will see Kenya Power and Lighting Company prevented from disconnecting customers over disputed bills. These suggestions are contained in the Energy Regulations 2024 and comes amid rising default cases despite the electricity distributor reaching deals with consumers. Kenyans have been paying up to 13,000 Kenyan shilling as reconnection fees when KPLC disconnects power in their homes. According to EPRA, solving power bill disputes between consumers and KPLC will take a maximum of 60 days. If the new regulations are passed, KPLC will compensate customers after blackouts. Currently, KPLC compensates Kenyans for injuries or damaged assets, but does not offer compensation for power losses. In Egypt, the private and investment sector experienced an annual increase of 30.2% in the number of foreigners acquiring work licenses in 2023. And this is according to data from the Central Agency for Public Mobilization and Statistics, and shows a significant surge in the total count of foreign nationals granted licenses, reaching 17,357 individuals, and that's a leap from 13,331 in the previous year. Of these permits, 7,973 were issued for the first time in 2023, constituting a significant portion of the total influx of 45.9%. The largest representation came from expatriates from non-Arab Asian countries, comprising 0.2%, or 6,275 individuals, followed closely by experts from European countries at 34.4%, which is 5,975 Arab countries. And in Uganda now, at the onset of budget framework paper presentation, government had sought to maintain the 2024-2025 financial year budget at the same levels as the current running budget. However, Parliament, after interaction with various ministries, departments and agencies, made recommendations regarding key unfunded areas, leading to an addendum increasing the ceiling to 58 trillion shillings at the time of submission of the detailed estimate. But by the end of budget discussions, another 13.8 trillion shillings was added, shooting the budget up to more than 72 trillion naira for the year. And the permanent secretary at the Finance Ministry and Secretary to the Treasury, Ramathan Gobi, claims that Cabinet agreed to pay off money borrowed from Bank of Uganda during COVID-19 pandemic to a tune of 7.8 trillion shillings. Now let's head to the crypto space now, see what's happening there. And one of the biggest exciting news there is still Davido's meme coin. I know Ladi talked about it yesterday, but I'm hoping to get a little bit of feel on it. Before we get into that excitement, let's see what the board is looking at. It's a green one this Friday at $68,087.43 after it gained 0.62%. And investors lost the chance of hopping in. I wonder, but it's 68,000 at this time. So if you're able to hop in just a couple of days ago, I think it still made up to $66 and all of that. So you would have made some money if you have Bitcoin, any portion of it. Ethereum is also green, 0.75% up. Solana, XRP. We have some story about XRP today, yes. They're saying that the price might soar to 500. By 500%. I wonder what's driving that. Cardano, FX, and all of that, so we see there. But let's look at the headlines for today. And top on that list is XRP. The price is set to surge by 500%. We're still waiting for the surge on Bitcoin. It hasn't happened yet. Maybe XRP is going to overtake that. We'll see. And then the whales shuffle 320 million coins. Also, that's also another news that's making the rounds at this time. And then, yes, that's one I know you might have heard, but we haven't talked about it. Let's talk about it today. Davido launched that meme coin. I wonder how that's doing. I heard it hasn't been doing so well as of yesterday. Perhaps the tide has changed. Solomon Amunde joins us now to give us updates. Hi, Solomon. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Ini. Good afternoon.
Yeah, good to see you. What's happening to Davido's meme coin? How's it doing?
Okay, that has had an amazing run, and it has been welcomed by mixed feelings coming from the communities. Most persons aren't happy that Davido is dropping a meme coin, while most persons, they are excited and euphoric because of how much they'll make from the project. So generally speaking, it's mixed feelings. But personally, if I were to advise, I wouldn't have advised him to do such.
I guess he didn't ask for your advice, Solomon. But are Nigerians interested? Do they believe in the project?
I didn't get that.
Nigerians showing interest in the project, in the meme coin?
I doubt they are showing progress or interest in the meme coin. I doubt that. It's majorly because most persons that are excited about the meme coin is basically because they are looking at making profits from it. That's just it. Majorly the meme coin traders and the Indian traders. But long term, this wouldn't do well for the Nigerian crypto space. It will cast a shadow on the crypto space because for someone like Davido, one of the biggest artists in Africa and arguably the biggest in Nigeria, dropping a meme coin at this time, it doesn't say so well about the crypto space in Nigeria.
Would it have been better if it was at another time? Because you emphasize at this time.
Yeah. Why at this time is because of the regulations with this SEC and federal government parastatals that we're having issues with currently. At another time, it wouldn't have still made sense because one thing with crypto is if someone with so much influence drops a project, it can affect the person's image negatively, especially when the person is dropping a meme coin, because like it or not, there are some persons that might benefit from it, and there would obviously be more persons that wouldn't benefit from it. So those persons will keep dragging that person in the future, and whenever the coin goes up or down, they would obviously call onto that person to either accuse the person or blame the person. And also there's a chance of the coin being used for pump and dump, and whoever dropped the project to be accused in the future for using the project as a pump and dump scheme. So that's why it's not even nice for celebrities to go dropping coins, because they have so much influence already.
All right, Solomon, thank you for that. We'll see what happens to that coin in the coming days. Thank you, and do have a great weekend.
Thank you very much, Annie. Thank you.
So that's it on the program. It's not just Solomon that will have a great weekend. I wish you a great weekend, especially a restful weekend. You know, after the week's work, you really need to rest so you are energized for the next week again. I'll try and do the same, but Lade will not have to rest tomorrow. He'll be here at 7 p.m. Capital Market to give you a summary of all that's happening in the market. The NGX is obviously good news for investors. I'll see you on Monday. God's grace. I'm Ini John Mekwa. Bye-bye.